Welcome back to Views with Hughes, Jennifer News. This is Jerome Hughes. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, it feels like there's not a single week that goes by without Kathleen Kennedy and Disney stepping into yet another legal minefield, okay? And you gotta wonder how Kathleen Kennedy managed to turn one of the most beloved entertainment companies into this kind of mess. Now, let's be honest here. Whether it's Disney getting sued by employees or that's claiming that they were underpaid for years, or the massive lawsuit for Gina Carano against Disney and Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy as well, for basically canceling her over her political differences, or perhaps even the tragic incidents like deaths in Disney's theme parks or even at their restaurants in Disney Springs. And Kathleen Kennedy, well, of course, she's not behind the thing that happened in Disney Park and stuff, but Kathleen Kennedy and Disney are constantly embroiled in legal battles. And guess what? Kathleen Kennedy and Disney are once again facing another massive lawsuit. And this time, it's all about Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy's reckless decision to use Peter Cushing's image in Rogue One, as you all remember. Yes, Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy are getting taken to court over this, okay? Now, let's be real here. Under Kathleen Kennedy, it seems like, there's no controversy is too big to avoid. And basically, she's not above the law either. Now, if you've seen Rogue One, you know exactly what I'm talking about. See, Kathleen Kennedy and her and the company Lucasfilm digitally recreated Peter Cushing as Grand Moff Tarkin, and not just him. You see, Kathleen Kennedy allowed her team to do the same with Princess Leia, as you all saw at the end of the movie Rogue One. And this isn't just a one-off issue. It's part of Kathleen Kennedy pattern that we all come to expect. And now someone coming forward saying Disney and Kathleen Kennedy didn't have the right to do this, and now a judge has decided that this case deserves its day in court, despite Kathleen Kennedy and Disney's best efforts to try to have it dismissed. Now, this is huge, people. Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy, and Lucasfilm being a subsidiary of Disney, are being sued for recreating Peter Cushing's image without proper authorization, and Kathleen Kennedy and her troubles are, well, basically they're not going away anytime soon. Now, Kathleen Kennedy is at the center of yet another storm, showing how cut out of touch she is with reality. Now, according to reports, a friend of Peter Cushing, Kevin Francis, has filed a lawsuit claiming that Disney and Lucasfilm, along with Kathleen Kennedy, didn't have permission to digitally recreate the late actor's likeness for Rogue One. Now, Francis is not just some random guy. He runs Tiburn Film Productions, and he's brought claims against Lucasfilm, and including Kathleen Kennedy, Rogue One producer Luna Kevi Industries, the late executor of the Cushing's estate, and Cushing's agency, Associated International Management. According to Francis, there was an agreement made between him and Cushing back in 1993, 1 year before that actor passed away at the age of 81. And the actor stated that any recreation of Cushing's image would require authorization, something that, Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm seemed to allegedly completely ignore. Now, Kathleen Kennedy and her team seems like they didn't care about those agreements. They cared about pushing forward with whatever suited Kathleen Kennedy's vision at the moment. All right. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this stuff a little, far-fetched? Agreements about digital recreations in 1993? Well, yeah, it does sound strange to some people, especially considering that the technology was in its infancy back then. But with Kathleen Kennedy running the show, nothing is to her is, well, for us, is too absurd to believe anymore. But we're here, and apparently there's enough to this case that a judge think is worth exploring. Now, this is not just some frivolous lawsuit. This is a legitimate legal battle, and where Disney and Kathleen Kennedy are getting called out for what many of us would consider basic respect for an actor's legacy. All right, and this shouldn't be much of a surprise, and that's something that Kathleen Kennedy seems to have completely disregarded in her quest to use technology without boundaries. But what really caught my eye, though, is how Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm tried to weasel their way out of this mess. And Kathleen Kennedy and her team argue that they didn't think they needed anyone's permission to recreate Cushing's image. Yes, you heard that right. But that's a possibility. Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm thought they could just do with it without any consequences. And their argument was based on Cushing's original contract for the 1977 Star Wars film, now known as Episode 4: A New Hope, and some nonsense about the nature of special effects. And Kathleen Kennedy's arrogance didn't stop there. They even paid around $37,000 to Cushing's estate after the fact once they got called out by this agent. But that's just the thing. Kathleen Kennedy and her team didn't reach out first. Kathleen Kennedy didn't even try to get anyone's approval beforehand. They just wanted to go ahead and do it and then try to throw some money at the problem when it got caught. Now, this is a perfect example of Disney and Kathleen Kennedy's complete arrogance. You see, Kathleen Kennedy didn't care about respecting Cushing's memory or making sure everything was above board, and Kathleen Kennedy saw an opportunity to use advanced CGI to recreate a beloved character. It didn't bother to ask anyone and thought Kathleen Kennedy could buy her way out of trouble when it all blew up in her face. And let me tell you, this is a pattern we've seen time and time again with Disney, especially under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership. Now, Kathleen Kennedy and her repeated failures show how little regard she has for respecting the legacy of talent that built this franchise, okay? Now, think about it. This isn't just the first time Disney and Kathleen Kennedy have tried to cut corners with people who've contributed to their massive success. You see, remember Alan Dean Foster? One of the earliest Star Wars authors, wrote The Splinter of the Mind's Eye Black in 1978 and a handful of other novels over the years, including the novelization of The Force Awakens. This guy was a big deal, but Disney and Kathleen Kennedy apparently didn't think he was worth paying. Now, Foster came forward a few years ago saying he didn't receive royalties in years, even while dealing with health issues. And it took a huge public outcry for Disney and Kathleen Kennedy to finally pay him what he was owed. And for what I've heard, this isn't just about an Alan Dean Foster issue. It's a problem faced by a lot of old Star Wars expanded universe authors all under Kathleen Kennedy's watch. Disney is still selling these books, reprinting them with new Legends covers, but they're skipping out on, the royalties to people who created this content in the first place, while Kathleen Kennedy continues to ignore these creators and focus on her own agenda. Now, it's like Disney and Kathleen Kennedy have this corporate culture of just doing whatever they want and hoping no one notices. And when they do get called out, Kathleen Kennedy and her team scramble to do damage control, usually with as little financial impact on them as possible. And they didn't think to ask permission to recreate Cushing's image. You see, Kathleen Kennedy didn't pay Foster his due royalties, and they pulled similar stunts with other authors and creators. It's as if Disney and Kathleen Kennedy think they're untouchable and that Kathleen Kennedy's actions won't catch up with her as well as with the company. Now, this lawsuit is setting up to be a massive battle because we're talking about big questions regarding the future of the digital creations, recreations, CGI, and how companies like Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy of Lucasfilm use the likeness of actors, especially when they've passed away. If you remember, James Earl Jones, the iconic voice of Darth Vader, reportedly signed a contract allowing his voice to be reproduced using AI. So this kind of thing is going to keep happening, and the question is, who is going to protect the legacies of these actors when people like Kathleen Kennedy are more focused on exploiting these digital tools without any regard for individuals that they're affecting? You see, Kathleen Kennedy and her priorities are not aligned with respecting the actors or the fans. And you know what? It's not a surprise because Disney and Kathleen Kennedy are walking on a dangerous line here, and not just legally, but also morally. And I know a lot of people out there are starting to feel fed up with Kathleen Kennedy and her way of handling things. And we're talking about a company that has been cutting corners on paying people what they are owed and not respecting agreements and just plowing forward with whatever suits Kathleen Kennedy and her vision, assuming the courts or public opinion will eventually back down. But that's not happening anymore. You see, this case is moving forward, and it's just the latest example of how Kathleen Kennedy and her business practices are actually starting to catch up to her, and Disney and Kathleen Kennedy's inability to handle these controversies without tarnishing Disney's name has reached a tipping point. And I can't help but, think about this whole situation, how this whole situation ties back to the broader pattern we've seen with Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy under her leadership. Now, this is the same Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy that have been stumbling from one controversy to the next, whether it's the mishandling of the Star Wars sequels, firing Gina Carano for having opinions and Kathleen Kennedy didn't like, or failing to pay authors who helped build the very universe Kathleen Kennedy and Disney are still profiting from today. Now, Kathleen Kennedy has alienated, longtime fans and shown that she doesn't really care about the people who made Star Wars the phenomenon it is. It's all about the bottom line for Kathleen Kennedy, and she doesn't really care, as it seems, to get steamrolled away. So, exactly what's next? This lawsuit is set to go to trial, and it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. But regardless of the outcome, it's clear that Disney's way of doing business under Kathleen Kennedy is under scrutiny like we've never seen before, and they've only got themselves and Kathleen Kennedy to blame. Now, maybe it's time Kathleen Kennedy took a long, hard look in the mirror and started respecting the people who made her and Disney the entertainment giant they are today. Kathleen Kennedy needs to be held accountable. So, what do y'all think? Are Disney and Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm finally facing the consequences of their actions? Do you think that this case could change how Hollywood and Kathleen Kennedy handle the digital recreations in the future? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you might have this particular topic. If you enjoyed what I shared in this video, go ahead, smash the like button and share far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already and you enjoyed all the content that I put out there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Click the bell notification so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.